I never imagined my life would shatter in a single sentence, especially not from the man I once believed would stand beside me through everything. But that night, as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the dress I'd chosen for his company gala, a dress I'd worn with pride, he looked me up and down with an expression that felt colder than winter steel. "Is that what you're wearing?" he said. I remember blinking, unsure if I'd heard him correctly. "Yes," I answered. "Why?" He shrugged with a sigh that stung more than any insult. "Nothing. It's just basic." A strange burn ignited in my chest. "It's a dress," I replied quietly. "A professional dress." "It's a basic dress," he repeated, "for a basic life." I felt my breath stumble. His tone wasn't teasing. It wasn't frustrated. It was dismissive, like he was evaluating a piece of furniture he regretted buying. And before I could stop myself, I asked, "What is that supposed to mean?" He turned fully toward me, and the final blow dropped with surgical precision. "You're too basic to give me the life I deserve." For a second, I couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. The room remained perfectly still, but something inside me cracked clean through. 9 years together, 6 years married, and this was what he saw. Someone unworthy of his imagined success, someone small, someone holding him back. I swallowed hard and somehow managed to say just one word. "Noted." That was it. No fight, no screaming, no dramatic exit, just a quiet acknowledgement of a truth he clearly wanted me to accept. He grabbed his suit jacket and left for the gala without me. I remained standing there alone, staring at my own reflection, a reflection now fractured by his words. I poured myself a drink afterward, not out of habit, but because the silence in the house felt so heavy it needed company. And when morning came, something inside me had shifted. I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, maybe even years. By noon, I was sitting in my attorney's office, activating a clause my husband never imagined I would use, one he had forgotten he signed. And the moment he was called into his lawyer's office, the way he stormed out, I knew his world had just been shaken as violently as mine had been, because the basic woman he underestimated had finally drawn the line. I'm Doris J. Sims, 38 years old, and until 2 months ago, I genuinely believed my marriage was steady. Maybe not perfect, maybe not sparkling like the curated lives on social media, but steady, warm, predictable. The kind of life I once thought was enough. My husband and I met 9 years ago at a professional conference. He was there to network, polished and strategic in that charming way that makes people gravitate toward him. I was there for work, focused on the software development panel I was scheduled to attend. Our worlds collided in a hallway conversation over stale coffee, and something just clicked. He admired my groundedness. I admired his drive. It all felt simple then, like two puzzle pieces finally aligning. We married 3 years later, 6 years of marriage. 6 years I thought meant loyalty, partnership, a future we were building one small decision at a time. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, always chasing quotas, targets, and the next promotion. I respected his ambition. In fact, I used to be proud of it. Meanwhile, I lived a quieter life. I earned good money in tech, invested wisely, and preferred calm weekends over endless social climbing. My car was practical, my wardrobe comfortable, my happiness uncomplicated. But about 18 months ago, the shift began. It started small. He would come home from dinners with colleagues, talking about the luxury cars they drove, the brand-name suits they wore, the vacations they boasted about. I thought he was just decompressing after long days. I'd listen, nod, and sometimes remind him that we didn't need to compete with anyone. We were financially secure, stable, and happy in our own lane. But then those comments began to turn toward me. "Do you ever think about upgrading your wardrobe?" he asked one evening when I walked in wearing my favorite cardigan. "I like what I wear," I replied gently, brushing off the sting. He pointed at my car next. "When are you going to trade that thing in? It's embarrassing when my coworkers see us drive up." I remember laughing in disbelief. "It runs well. It's paid off. Why would I replace it just to impress people?" He only muttered, "You just don't get it." More and more, he compared me to other people's wives. How polished they looked, how ambitious they seemed, how they made their husbands look good. The night he said, "My friend's husband just became VP. What's your timeline looking like?" Something inside me faltered. It wasn't that I lacked ambition. I simply valued peace more than status. But he heard that as complacency, as mediocrity. And slowly, the man who once told me he loved how grounded I was began treating that very quality like a flaw. His family didn't help. His mother hinted often, too often, that he deserved someone who pushed him higher. His friends adored gossiping about promotions, investments, and luxury purchases. I became the silent outsider in conversations that revolved around achievements instead of connection. But I kept trying. I gave him space, reassurance, patience. I told myself he was stressed, that the pressure of his field was wearing him down. I dismissed red flag after red flag because that's what you do when you love someone. You hope they'll find their way back. Except he didn't. Every comment chipped away at us. Every comparison widened the gap between who we used to be and who he wanted me to become. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing him softly, gradually, the way sand slips through fingers without you noticing until your hand is empty. Then came the gala night, when everything cracked open. But the truth is, the fall began long before that. It just took one brutal sentence to reveal how far we had already drifted. Looking back, the most painful part isn't the moment he called me basic. It's realizing the signs had been there, quiet, subtle, creeping into our life long before the words finally spilled out of him. About 18 months ago, he began changing in ways I didn't fully understand. At first, it was harmless enough. New suits, more expensive watches, subscriptions to glossy lifestyle magazines. He started following influencers who flaunted designer lives online, the kind of people who photographed their morning lattes beside luxury cars. One evening, he came home from work unusually energized. "You should see Mark's new Porsche," he announced. "It's incredible. He says it really helps him make the right impression." "The right impression on whom?" I asked, smiling. "The people who make decisions," he replied, almost annoyed that I didn't already know. I remember patting the sofa beside me, trying to lighten the moment. "Well, if I ever need to impress someone, I'll let you know." He didn't laugh. He didn't even sit. He just looked at me with a strange distance in his eyes, like he was already measuring the gap between the life we had and the life he wished we had. And the comments kept coming. At a dinner with his coworkers, I wore a simple navy dress, elegant, modest, exactly my style. But on the drive home, he said, "Jessica looks stunning tonight. Her husband must really support her style." I turned to look at him. "You're implying I don't look good because you don't spend money on my clothes?" He sighed. "I'm just saying it wouldn't hurt to elevate things." His friends fed the fire without even realizing it. They talked about expensive vacations to Europe, private island resorts, and designer bags their wives collected like trophies. The more they postured, the more my husband absorbed their values, as if they were universal truths. And every time I felt myself shrink a little. One afternoon, I met his sister for coffee. We'd always been close, but even she had started noticing his shift. "Doris," she said gently, "he's been different lately, obsessing over status, over how he looks compared to others." "I know," I whispered, staring into my cup. "He keeps making comments about my clothes, my car, my job." She reached out and touched my hand. "Don't internalize them. He's under pressure. Sometimes he lashes out at the closest person." "I just wish he'd talk to me," I murmured. But instead of talking, he drifted further. His phone was glued to his hand. Messages from coworkers filled his evenings. He said things like, "You don't understand ambition. You don't know what it takes to move up. I can't afford to look average." It wasn't about money, it was about image, about chasing an illusion he thought would finally make him someone. And every time he said something sharp, dismissive, or belittling, he would follow it with the same tired line. "I'm just stressed." But stress doesn't turn love into contempt. Stress doesn't turn admiration into comparison. Stress doesn't make a man ashamed of the woman he married. Something deeper was happening, a hunger for validation, a desperation to keep up with people who didn't care about him the way I did. Still, I tried to hold on. I tried to remind him of who we once were. I tried to believe we could find our way back. But by the time the night of the gala arrived, I think we both knew something irreversible was approaching, something sharp enough to finally expose the cracks we had been tiptoeing around for far too long. 3 weeks ago, the moment that would split my life into before and after finally arrived. It was the night of his company's annual gala, a glamorous event where everyone showed up shimmering in designer fabrics, pretending not to compare salaries or titles, though you could feel the competition humming in the air like electricity. I had attended with him for years, always blending in quietly, always proud to stand by his side, even if the world he inhabited never felt like mine. That afternoon, I spent extra time getting ready, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted things to feel normal, stable, us, against the world, the way it used to be. I slipped into a deep emerald dress I'd owned for years, a dress he once said made my eyes look warm. I curled my hair the way he liked. I even chose the perfume he'd gifted me on our 3rd anniversary. When I stepped out of the bedroom, he was already dressed. Black suit, polished shoes, hair styled with meticulous precision. He looked expensive, ambitious, polished. Exactly the man he'd worked so hard to become. He glanced at me, and everything changed. "That's what you're wearing?" he asked, his eyebrows lifting as if he genuinely couldn't believe his own eyes. I blinked, startled. "Yes. What's wrong with it?" He tilted his head slightly, scanning me from top to bottom. "Nothing," he said in a tone that meant the opposite. "It's just basic." The word landed like a slap. "It's a dress," I murmured, my throat tightening. "A perfectly fine dress." He didn't soften. He didn't backtrack. "It's a basic dress," he repeated, "for a basic life." I felt my heart thud painfully against my ribs. There was no joke in his voice, no nervous explanation. Just cold, clinical truth. Truth he had been holding on to long enough for it to come out without hesitation. I took a slow breath. What is that supposed to mean? He turned fully toward me, and the final blow came in a voice so calm it terrified me. "You're too basic to give me the life I deserve." Silence swallowed the room. Not the peaceful kind. No. This silence had weight, shape, edges. I felt it crushing against my chest, pressing into my skin, trying to force a reaction out of me. But all I could do was stand there, fighting the sting building behind my eyes. I managed to ask, barely above a whisper, "So that's how you see me?" He shrugged like we were discussing the weather. "I'm surrounded by successful people every day, people who want more, and then I come home to someone who doesn't." I swallowed. Hard. 9 years together, 6 years married. And this was the version of me he carried in his mind. A woman who wasn't enough. I took a small step back and said the only word I could trust myself with, "Noted." He blinked. "That's it? Noted? Are you not even going to defend yourself?" "There's nothing to defend," I replied quietly. "You just told me I'm not what you want. I heard you." "I want you to care," he snapped. "I want you to want more. I want a partnership, Doris, not complacency." I stared at him, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "And I want kindness. I want respect. But apparently that's too basic." He rolled his eyes, grabbed his jacket, and muttered, "I'm not doing this with you right now." He walked out. He left for the gala alone, the door slamming behind him with a sharp finality. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the echo. Then, with trembling hands, I poured myself a drink and sat on the edge of the couch. The house was unbearably quiet, the kind of quiet that forces you to confront truths you've been avoiding. And in that silence, a sentence kept replaying in my mind. "You're too basic to give me the life I deserve." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something inside me simply crystallized. By morning, the clarity was absolute. I woke up, got dressed, and drove to my attorney's office. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but because he had finally said out loud what he'd been thinking for over a year. And if he believed I wasn't enough for his life, then he didn't deserve a place in mine. The morning after the gala felt strangely still, as if the entire world had paused to see what I would do next. I woke with the remnants of his words lodged in my chest like shards of glass. "You're too basic to give me the life I deserve." They echoed in my mind before I even opened my eyes. I sat up slowly, the room dim with early sunlight, and for a moment I simply breathed, deep, heavy breaths that tasted like something breaking loose. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for a glass of water on the nightstand. My throat ached, not from crying, but from holding everything in. I had two choices, pretend nothing happened, or finally respond to the truth he had thrown at me. The choice wasn't hard. By mid-morning, I was driving to my attorney's office. The steering wheel felt rough beneath my palms, grounding me in a way I desperately needed. I replayed every comment he'd made in the last 18 months, not just the insults, but the sighs, the eye rolls, the subtle dismissals. Why didn't I see it clearly earlier? Why did I keep giving grace where I should have drawn boundaries? My attorney, Mr. Lawson, greeted me with a concerned frown the moment I stepped inside. He had known me for years, helped with my investments, advised me on long-term planning. He had seen me steady, confident, thriving. But he had never seen me like this. Doris, he said gently, what's going on? I sat down, smoothing my palms over my knees. I need to activate the postnuptial agreement. His eyebrows shot up. Are you sure? I nodded. Completely. He leaned back, studying me carefully. This isn't a decision people typically make lightly. I'm not making it lightly, I said, my voice steady but soft. I'm making it with full awareness. He told me last night that I'm not enough, not ambitious enough, not impressive enough, not worthy enough to give him the life he thinks he deserves. Mr. Lawson exhaled slowly. I see. He pulled up the document, scrolling through the clauses we'd drafted 3 years ago during our rough patch. Back then, counseling had suggested we create clarity, financial transparency, defined boundaries, equal protection. My husband had reluctantly agreed, brushing it off as a formality. It wasn't a formality now. If we activate this, Lawson said, she'll be notified within 24 hours. Her attorney will be legally required to review the terms with her. I understand. You realize she may react strongly. A bitter smile touched my lips. She already reacted strongly last night. This time, I'm simply responding. He nodded, tapping a few keys. Then I'll file the paperwork today. As I left his office, something inside me settled. Not joy, not triumph, just calm. A calm that only comes when you have finally stopped swimming against the current. That evening, when he came home late, I was sitting on the couch reading. My heart beat faster when I heard his keys hit the counter, but outwardly I remained composed. Hey, he said, about last night. I was stressed. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I looked up. Sure you did. He froze. What? You meant it. You think I'm basic. You think I'm holding you back from some fantasy life you want. You said exactly what you feel. He shifted uncomfortably. Can we not do this? I'm exhausted. We don't have to do anything. I just want you to know I heard you. He didn't respond. He walked to the bedroom and shut the door. I stayed on the couch, listening to the muffled sound of drawers opening and closing, wondering if he had even the slightest idea of what was coming. The next afternoon, around 2 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Mr. Lawson. Her lawyer just called, he said. She received the notification. How did she react? Her lawyer sounded surprised. I don't think she remembered the terms. A strange ache tugged at my chest. I didn't want her blindsided, but I also remembered every moment she blindsided me. Thank you, I said. I'll be ready. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded with calls and messages, texts dripping with disbelief, voicemails filled with anger and confusion. What the hell did you do? My lawyer just called me in for an urgent meeting. Call me back now. I didn't respond immediately. I needed space. I needed clarity. Finally, I texted. Check the postnuptial agreement we signed 3 years ago. Everything you need to know is in there. She called instantly. I didn't answer. Another voicemail followed. Are you serious right now? You filed for divorce without even talking to me? I replied simply, I activated the clause you agreed to. Your lawyer will explain. That evening, she stormed into the house, fury written across her face. You bastard! I looked up from chopping vegetables. Nice to see you too. She slammed her bag on the counter. Do you know what my lawyer just told me? Do you have any idea what you've done? I have a pretty good idea. According to the agreement, she would walk away with very little, and she finally understood that. But this wasn't revenge. This was me choosing myself after she spent 18 months choosing everyone else. And she wasn't ready for that truth. Her rage hit the kitchen before she even finished crossing the threshold. I could feel it. The sharp, frantic energy radiating off her as if the floorboards themselves were offended by what she had just learned. Do you have any idea what you've done? She shouted. I placed the knife down carefully, turned to face her, and met her eyes. I think so, yes. She looked stunned that I wasn't rising to meet her anger. It only made her angrier. My lawyer said I get almost nothing. The house, your investments, the savings. Everything stays with you. That's what you signed, I said calmly. She threw her hands into the air. I didn't know what I was signing. You had a lawyer sitting beside you, I reminded her. You had time to review everything. You chose to trust that we'd never need it. That agreement is insane, she snapped. You're using it to punish me. No, I said, stepping around the counter to give myself a little space. I'm using it to protect myself. Something I should have done emotionally a long time ago. She paused, chest rising and falling, eyes glossy with shock and fury. All of this, over one comment? She demanded. I shook my head. No. Over 18 months of comments. Over 18 months of you making it clear that I wasn't enough, not ambitious enough, not impressive enough, not wealthy enough, not shiny enough for the life you think you deserve. She stared at me, speechless. I could see the truth landing, not changing her mind, just landing. She began pacing, hands trembling as she ran them through her hair. "We can fix this," she whispered. "We can go back to therapy. We can talk. Just give me a chance." "I don't want to fix this," I said. "I want out." That was the moment I saw her panic bloom fully, raw, unfiltered, crashing into her expression with startling force. "You're throwing away 9 years because I made one mistake?" I met her gaze steadily. "You threw away 9 years the moment you decided I wasn't enough. I'm just finishing what you started." She looked as though someone had pulled the ground out from beneath her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The kitchen hummed with the low sound of the refrigerator, the only witness to a marriage dissolving in real time. Then she exhaled, shaky and small. "What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go?" "You're a successful pharmaceutical sales rep," I said softly. "You've always told me how capable you are. You'll figure it out." Her eyes widened in disbelief, because for once I wasn't cushioning her fall. "You're really going to do this?" she whispered. "It's already done." She grabbed her phone, stormed out, and I heard her engine roar as she sped down the street. 3 days passed. Her lawyer called mine attempting to negotiate, but the agreement was airtight, reviewed by 3 attorneys when we drafted it precisely to avoid disputes like this. Mr. Lawson gently repeated that nothing could be changed. On the 3rd day, my phone rang again. This time I answered. It was her mother. Her voice was calm, not accusatory. "I heard what happened," she said. "I'm sure you did," I answered quietly. She took a breath. "I always liked you, Doris. I want you to know that. But I also know my daughter. She gets caught up chasing the wrong things. She forgets what matters." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "Thank you. I appreciate that." "Just tell me one thing," her mother said gently. "Are you sure? Truly sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. A soft sigh. "Then, I understand. Maybe this will be the wake-up call she needed." We hung up, and for the first time since activating the clause, I didn't feel alone in the decision. But the escalation wasn't over. The next morning, the front door rattled. She had forgotten I changed the locks, my attorney's advice to ensure privacy and safety. She knocked instead, the sound desperate and sharp. When I opened the door, she stood there with red, swollen eyes, holding nothing but her phone. "I want to talk," she said. "So talk." "Not here. Let me in." "This is my house now," I said. "You don't live here anymore." "We're still married," she whispered. "Legally." "Not for long." Her breath wavered. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "About everything. About you. I was so focused on what everyone else had that I forgot why I married you." My heart tightened, but not because I wanted her back. It was the memory of who she used to be before the world twisted her priorities. "And why did you marry me?" I asked. "Because you were steady," she said. "Because you were honest. Because you made me feel safe, and I ruined that. I made you feel less." "No," I corrected softly. "You made me feel invisible." She wiped her cheeks. "Can we please try to work through this?" "No." "Why not?" "Because even now, right now, you're not actually sorry for what you said. You're sorry for the consequences. You're sorry the basic woman you underestimated had a spine and a lawyer." Her face crumpled. "That's not fair." "Neither was spending 18 months being told I wasn't enough." She swallowed hard. "What about everything we built together?" I laughed, but not cruelly, just tired. "What did we build? A home I owned before you moved in? A life where I compromised and you criticized? That's not a partnership, that's a performance, and I'm done performing." She stared at me, trembling. Then something inside her snapped. "You know what? Fine," she spat. "Keep the house. Keep everything, but don't act like you're some innocent victim. You're vindictive, cold. You're using legal technicalities to punish me for being human." "I'm using legal agreements we both signed," I replied, voice calm, "to protect myself from someone who made it clear I wasn't worth her respect." Her eyes flashed, not anger this time, but defeat. She turned and walked away without another word. This time, I didn't expect her to come back. The night after she walked away from the doorstep for the last time was the quietest night of my life, and somehow also the loudest. Every corner of the house felt heavier, stuffed with memories that refused to stay silent. It wasn't grief for losing her, it was grief for who we used to be. When the door clicked shut behind her earlier that day, something in me closed too. Not angrily, not dramatically, just finally. But endings, even the necessary ones, have a weight, and that weight settled on my chest like a thick blanket I couldn't lift. I walked through the house slowly, almost like an observer, instead of the person who had lived here for years. The framed photographs on the hallway wall felt like relics from another lifetime, one where she looked at me with adoration instead of disappointment, one where I believed our differences were part of our strength, not the fault lines that would eventually destroy us. I paused at a picture taken during our first year of dating. She was laughing at something out of frame, leaning into me, happiness glowing across her face. I stared at it so long my eyes stung. "How did we get here?" I whispered into the quiet. But of course, there was no answer. There never is in these moments. I made myself a cup of tea, knowing I wouldn't drink it. My hands wrapped around the warmth anyway. It was something to hold, something that didn't judge me or measure me or expect me to be more than I already was. For the first time since activating the clause, the reality of what I'd done sank in. This was happening. This was real. There was no turning back. Not for her, not for me. I didn't doubt the decision, but that didn't mean the loneliness didn't bite. Even a toxic dynamic becomes familiar, and familiar things are hard to release, even when they're choking you. I sat on the couch, the same couch where I'd waited for her on gala night, and let the silence press against me. My chest felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out everything soft and left only space behind. The phone buzzed occasionally, but I didn't touch it. I didn't have the emotional capacity to explain myself again, to justify my worth, to repeat the story of how I'd spent 18 months slowly being turned into a shadow inside my own marriage. Around midnight, I curled my legs beneath me and leaned my head back. A heavy ache settled in my spine. I hadn't realized how physically exhausting emotional damage could be, how your body carries every unspoken argument, every withheld tear, every moment you chose peace over truth. That night, I finally let a single tear slip. Not because I wanted her back, not because I regretted choosing myself, but because I had stayed too long in a place where love was conditional, where my value depended on how impressive I looked to her coworkers. And acknowledging that was painful. The next morning, I woke early, not rested, but steady. Still, something inside me felt fragile, like a bruise that hadn't healed. I brewed coffee, sat at the dining table, and stared at the empty chair across from me. There had been a time when she would have sat there laughing, telling stories about her day, a time when she would have reached for my hand across the table, a time when we looked at each other like we were enough. But that version of us had died long before the divorce. What hurt most wasn't losing her. It was losing the illusion that she had ever truly seen me. When we dated, she admired my stability, my grounded nature, my refusal to chase status. She used to tell me I made her feel safe in a world obsessed with appearances. But as her world changed, so did her values. Ambition twisted into comparison. Admiration turned into resentment. Love slowly corroded into contempt. And somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing me at all. I picked up my phone and absent-mindedly scrolled through social media. That's when I saw it, one of her posts. A vague, poetic caption about betrayal and losing everything, paired with a heavily filtered photo of the sky. She was performing again, curating her heartbreak the same way she curated the rest of her life. I stared at the screen for a long time, something inside me sinking just a little deeper. Even now, she wasn't grieving our marriage. She was grieving the image of what she lost. I placed the phone face down and exhaled slowly. This was my lowest moment, not because I wanted her back, but because I realized I had loved someone who loved a performance more than a person. Someone who wanted a partner who could be a status symbol, not a sanctuary. And understanding that truth was the darkest part of all. My lowest point didn't last long. Pain has a strange way of clarifying things once the initial shock fades. And the morning after seeing her social media post about betrayal, something inside me finally clicked. Not a surge of anger, not a desire to defend myself, just a quiet, powerful recognition. I had been undervaluing myself for far too long. After all the years of carrying the emotional load, steadying our life, supporting her ambitions without asking for anything in return, I had let her convince me, slowly, subtly, that I was the weaker link, the one who needed to catch up. But as I sat at the dining table sipping lukewarm coffee, a realization washed over me with startling clarity. I was the one who built stability. I was the one who invested wisely. I was the one who entered the marriage with assets and long-term vision. I was the one who offered love without conditions. And she had mistaken my steadiness for smallness. It wasn't the same thing. That morning, for the first time in a long time, I opened the post-nuptial agreement. I read through the clauses slowly, carefully, line by line. Everything was fair. everything was balanced. Everything had been reviewed with legal professionals, and she had signed it voluntarily. My chest didn't ache this time, it felt released, as if my heart had finally stopped trying to fit into a space that no longer welcomed it. Around noon, I went to a nearby cafe, somewhere quiet, somewhere neutral. As I waited for my drink, I heard someone say my name. Doris? I turned. It was one of her colleagues, a woman I recognized from previous company events. She approached me with a polite, almost wary smile. I heard you two are splitting up, she said softly. I'm sorry. I nodded. Thank you. She hesitated, then added something that would become the pivot point in my story. For what it's worth, I always thought she was too focused on the wrong things. I blinked. What do you mean? She cared so much about appearances, about keeping up with everyone else, about seeming successful. But you, she paused, choosing her words carefully. You always seemed genuinely content, and that's real success. Most people never figure that out. Her honesty struck me like a warm light through a storm cloud. After she walked away, I sat there in silence, processing her words. Someone outside our marriage had noticed the shift too, not just in behavior, but in values. Someone neutral, someone who had nothing to gain by telling me this. And in that moment, the fog I'd been living in finally lifted. I didn't lose her. She lost me. She lost the stability she claimed to crave. She lost the partner who supported her ambitions without condition. She lost the love she took for granted. She lost the home she treated like a stage instead of a sanctuary. Realizing this didn't make me arrogant. It made me free. I no longer saw myself through the distorted lens she had been holding up to me, the lens that made me appear basic, mediocre, unambitious, just because I wasn't chasing the same illusions she was. In the cafe's quiet hum, I finally reclaimed my self-worth. When I left and walked back to my car, my steps felt lighter, my breaths deeper, my heart steadier. The divorce wasn't a collapse anymore. It was a turning point, one I walked into willingly and with clarity. That afternoon, Mr. Lawson called to update me on the proceedings. His voice was calm, efficient, sure. Everything is moving forward smoothly, he said. Given how clearly defined the agreement is, the process will be fast. Good, I replied, and I meant it. That evening, I made dinner alone, not in sadness this time, but in peace. I chopped vegetables, stirred the pan, listened to the sizzle, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief, not because she was gone, but because I was finally done shrinking myself to fit a version of success that was never mine to begin with. That night, as I got into bed, I whispered into the dim room, "You were wrong about me." It wasn't for her, it was for me. The funny thing about truth is that once it's out in the open, it doesn't need your help to do its work. It moves on its own, quiet, steady, relentless. And over the next 2 weeks, I watched the consequences of her choices unfold exactly the way gravity does, naturally and inevitably. The divorce filings moved faster than either of us expected. My attorney wasn't exaggerating. The post-nuptial agreement made everything streamlined. No debates over property, no arguments about shared assets, no emotional bargaining, just signatures, procedures, formalities. And she hated every bit of it. She moved out within days, staying with a friend. I didn't ask who. It wasn't my business anymore. But even from a distance, I felt the shock radiating off her, the sudden collapse of the world she thought she controlled. Meanwhile, my phone remained silent, except for necessary communications from Mr. Lawson. No drama, no chaos, no pleas for reconciliation after the last doorstep confrontation. The space was liberating. But her online life told a different story. She started posting vague captions. Heartbreak changes you. Some betrayals cut deepest. Not everyone is who they seem. Photos of sunsets, long walks, close-up shots of her eyes with teardrop emojis. A performance, a curated tragedy. People commented with sympathy. Stay strong. You deserve better. One day he'll regret it. I didn't feel anger. I felt tired. Tired for her. Tired for the version of herself she still refused to confront. Tired knowing she was mourning not the marriage, but the loss of control. A few mutual friends texted me, confused. "Hey, is everything okay?" She's saying she's been blindsided. Do you want to talk about it? I kept my answers simple and graceful. We wanted different things. It was time to move on. No blame, no details, no vindication. I didn't need to clear my name, because I wasn't playing the public game she was. One afternoon, at a small coffee shop downtown, a familiar voice called out, "Doris?" I turned to see one of her colleagues, the same woman who had spoken to me earlier during my turning point. She approached with a gentle look in her eyes. "I hope you're doing okay," she said. "I am," I replied, and it was true. She hesitated, then lowered her voice slightly. "I don't want to speak badly about anyone, but she's been telling people she didn't know what she signed, that you ambushed her." "She had a lawyer present," I said softly. "She signed voluntarily." "I know," the woman exhaled. "People forget that responsibility doesn't disappear just because regret arrives." Her words struck me as painfully accurate. And in that moment, I realized how differently the fallout was landing on each of us. For me, it was closure. For her, it was exposure. The life she'd curated, the glamorous future she imagined, the image of being the polished wife in a high-status world had cracked open. Now she had to sit with the truth that she had pushed away the one person who wasn't demanding anything from her except respect. But the most revealing moment came from an unexpected place: her mother. A few days earlier, when I picked up the phone and heard her voice say, "I always liked you," something in me settled. Her mother wasn't calling to defend her daughter blindly. She was calling as someone who had witnessed the change, someone who understood the weight of our history, not just the mess of our ending. "She forgets what actually matters," her mother had said. And she was right, because somewhere along the way, my wife began measuring her life not by love or loyalty or growth, but by luxury, labels, and external validation. So when those things didn't shield her from the consequences of her own choices, the fallout hit her harder than she ever expected. Meanwhile, I found myself reclaiming space, physically and emotionally. Rooms felt different without her presence. Silence felt soothing instead of heavy. Even the air felt cleaner, as if the house itself exhaled once the tension left. A week into the fallout, I stood in the living room and realized, I'm going to sell this place. Not out of bitterness, not to erase memories, but because I wanted a fresh start. Clean lines, no history, no emotional residue. A new space for a new version of myself. I began browsing listings for condos downtown. Modern spaces, wide windows, sunlight, simplicity. A place that didn't echo with the sound of who we used to be. Starting over at 38 isn't ideal, but staying in a life that demanded I shrink myself would have been worse. And as I watched the fallout continue around us, something settled fully into place. She hadn't been blindsided. She had been warned for 18 months. She just didn't believe the woman she called basic would ever choose herself. She underestimated me, and that was the costliest mistake she ever made. 2 weeks after everything began unraveling, the divorce papers were nearly finalized. The process was quick, quicker than either of us imagined, because the agreement we signed years ago left no room for renegotiation, no space for bargaining, no loopholes to exploit. My attorney said 3 more months and everything would be done. My wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, had moved in with a friend and continued posting cryptic phrases about heartbreak, about being betrayed, about losing everything. But the performance no longer stirred anything inside me. I had finally detached myself from the version of the story she wanted the world to believe. I wasn't interested in destroying her reputation. I wasn't interested in correcting her narrative. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was simply done. One morning, I ran into one of her colleagues at a coffee shop again. She approached me with a gentle smile, the same quiet sincerity as before. "For what it's worth," she said, "some people spend so much time chasing what looks impressive that they forget to recognize what actually is." Her words lingered long after she walked away, because that was our marriage in a single sentence. She chased the appearance of success while forgetting the substance of it. She wasn't a villain, just someone who lost her way and lost the one person who had offered her stability without conditions. As for me, I started packing the house, not out of bitterness, but out of renewal. I boxed up old photos, sorted through drawers, let go of things we'd collected together. There was no sadness in it now, only clarity. I wanted a place with no ghosts, no echoes of arguments, no subtle shadows of the person I used to become for her. Downtown, I toured a quiet condo filled with natural light, clean lines, a view of the skyline, an empty canvas. And for the first time in a long while, my heart didn't feel heavy. Starting over at 38 wasn't the failure she once implied. It was freedom. It was proof that a basic life, the life she mocked, was actually peaceful, grounded, genuine. It was a life I had built carefully, intentionally, without needing anyone's approval. And now I was reclaiming it. Before leaving the empty house for the last time, I looked around one final time and whispered, "I wasn't too basic. I just stopped apologizing for being enough." Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for both yourself and the other person, is recognize when love has transformed into something unrecognizable and walk away with dignity. That's what I did. And that's what I hope someone listening to my story will find the courage to do too. Never shrink yourself to fit someone else's idea of a better life. Choose peace. Choose self-worth. Choose you.